Welcome to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, a show where we promote indie comic book creators and become inspired by not only what they create, but their journey of creating it as well. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and with us today, we're going to have Mark Bernal on the show. He is a writer and founder of Lesser Known Comics, an indie publishing house that's just transformed what it means to make indie comics in this day and age. We talk about how music and comics not only relate to each other, but what they can learn from one another, how creating a community has really transformed not only making comics, but the experience of making comics and how beneficial that is. And also just balancing from work life to comic book life to family life and how to do that and what advice he has to give. I've known Mark Bernal a few years myself now as part of Lesser Known Comics, and he's been not only my mentor, but a great friend over the last couple of years and has loads of knowledge that he's always willing to share. And this is just a fragment of what his experience has been like and what he knows. And it brings me great pleasure to have him be our first guest on the CWS podcast. I hope to have him on many more times after this. And don't forget to check out all the links we have below. Don't forget to check out the Comics Wellspring social media to keep up with everything and when new episodes drop. And check out Apollo City Comics too to keep up with all of our news. But head over to the show now. We're really excited for this interview, so have fun. What is your title with Lesser Known Comics, Mark? Tell me what you do there and tell us all about the legacy of Lesser Known and how it's just been this kind of sensation with indie creators over the last almost, I mean, I feel like it's really blown up this year, but you've been hard at work at this since 2021.
Yeah, actually 2020, but thanks for doing your homework. Not messing with you, man. But yeah, so 2020 started working on my own comics. And so in the process, I was, started working with like three illustrators. And my intention was to pick one, but, fell in love with all three of them and was like, man, okay, I guess we're making three comics. And, in the process, they were posting a bunch of stuff on Instagram and, people were like, hey, if you're making comics, can you help me make your comics? And I didn't know how hard it was at the time, or how hard it was going to be, this indie comic space. So I was like, sure. Like, why not? Just like a road trip where you're just piling people into the van and, wake up now, 3 years later and helped publish, I think 32 books at the last count, with 30 more coming in the next 12 months. It's been a little crazy. So with anything growing so big, I kind of like, a lot of times, oh, you're the owner of Lesser Known Comics. And it's like, well, it doesn't feel like I own anything. We're totally creator owned. And creator driven. So I'm not even in charge of anything, but I'll take the founder role. I think that's probably like, I can at least say, yes, I founded Lesser Known Comics.
I love that. And that's interesting because, I mean, you're just trying to break into your comics yourself. That was your whole point. That's where all this started. You were just trying to make a book, a single book, pretty much. And well, you actually had a few titles starting off right away. How many titles have you written at this point? Just coming out of the imprint?
Yeah, so I brought visual aid. So I had 7 or actually 8 minis that put out. And by minis, they're like just short, 6 to 10 page comics. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was, just start small, do these short stories because you have to finish a project to understand if you're any good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and anytime you work with a new illustrator or new, co-creator or anything like that, it's a totally different journey. Right. So when I got to my full length titles, which I got,
which we have highlighted right here. Oh, there we go. Dead or Still Dying. And Either of Them Are Us.
Yeah, it was a lot better because I knew what to expect going into like a 22 plus page journey with somebody having done it so many times, in 6 page, 10 page intervals and stuff like that. Because you learn a lot of hard lessons, anytime you make a book and, like a lot of people make the mistake, okay, I'm going to jump into like a graphic novel, and it's like, That's a big ambition, right? It'd be like, oh, the
Hmm.
first road trip we ever going to take, we're going to drive, from here to Panama. Like you're like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like, let's just try and make it like across the town, like for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, so you had these titles, you had these artists with them. You're saying there was a lot of hard mistakes you're coming across just jumping in out of the gate. Out of the gate, what did you experience that was kind of challenging up front?
Um, I was lucky in the fact that there was a lot of illustrators that I worked with that just like tremendous emotional intelligence and tremendous empathy in terms of being like, oh, okay, you're figuring this out, being very straightforward about like what they do and don't know about, comic book making, and pointing me to like excellent resources and stuff like that. But it didn't come without like, running into folks who maybe wouldn't be as forthcoming about the gaps in their own knowledge, right? So they say, oh, and maybe having a little bit of case of like their way or the highway type of thing. Um, but when you work with somebody who understands that comics is a collaborative process, following their lead in just like letting go of control of it, like becomes a lot more natural. So as a writer, being like, oh, okay, they're going to have a lot of ideas about this story that are better than mine. And I don't have to like feel like, is it your idea or my idea? Like it's really this thing that we're making is like an us product, and it's not a, you're not simply a hired gun, um, uh, many people, it's interesting to watch them, just get started having this idea that, oh, I want this illustrator to come in and just do exactly what I tell them, right? And you're like, that's a recipe for like not a great comic. What you want is you have an illustrator that comes in and is going to make not just great illustrations, but they're going to make great recommendations on how to tell a story visually. So and many times, the best way to do that is, to work with uh, folks who are making comics on their own, so illustrators who, have written and created books on their own, they don't necessarily need you to do it. But Jade Lauder, for example, I worked with him on Dead and Still Dying. Dude makes awesome comics without me. So when we're working together on a comic, it's like having two writers in a room, plus him as an illustrator, which has been a great realizing how powerful that is in comparison to what I thought comic book making was going to be. When I first got into it, where I'm just simply giving somebody a prompt and they're going to hand me pictures back of the words I have on a page. It's a night and day difference. It's not difference in degree; it's difference in kind.
It kind of sounds like, you and I have known each other for a really long time, a couple years now. We've had many conversations, as people know from the intro of how I introduce you, that you're pretty much a mentor to me, and you've really guided me along this entire process of making comics and helped me really get to where I'm at with the Apollo City Comics imprint and everything. And because of all that history we have, we know that like we realize that as former musicians, the way you would collaborate with a guitarist or a drummer and things like that, that seems to synchronize kind of the same way. The way comics works out, you kind of play in different bands, and then you end up finding other members that are in other bands that could join your band, and now you have this better, newer band that is stronger than you were before, and you're kind of running with that at that point. But in your beginning days and kind of transforming into these two new titles that you have out, what was it like trying to just find artists and illustrators to work with? Because I feel like that's one of the biggest struggles when you're starting as a musician trying to start a band, or when you're starting as a writer making a comic. And since you were that writer making the comic, what was that like struggle trying to find these creators to kind of really collaborate, to really find your niche to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a great point and a great analogy with band, with because I've been in the music space, and I've started bands, and I've also had situations where I was working with studio musicians.
Hmm.
So many of the first freelance illustrations I worked with, they were much more like a studio musician. They're not part of the band. They're just coming in. They're gonna make exactly what you asked for, and they're gonna move along to the next project. They're not they're not, there are great illustrators out there, Abel Garcia, who did our LKC number 6.
Hmm.
He's freelance, but he's got a heart of gold, right? So he will produce as if he was a member of the band, even though it's much like a freelance thing. But then you run into these other creators who are like building their own brand, and they're building their own comic book titles and stuff like that. And many cases, they're more willing to take a risk on a comic book. Like they'll say, okay, like I know we're not going to make money off of this first one, that this is a long-term haul, right? Just the same way as like you don't leave your first band practice and everyone's like, where's our money at, right? You're like, dude, we're gonna be doing this for free for quite a while,
Hmm.
before it turns a profit. um and and just like in many of those like creative endeavors, there's no way to like predict as well, like when like the return on investment comes. You just kind of like wake up one day and you're like, oh, like things are starting to click, you know.
Yeah.
um like in many cases, and it may have nothing to do with your project itself, right? So um Franco, who did Either Them or Us, like all of a sudden, like when I was reaching out to him, he was like, "Oh, actually, I got all this other stuff going on." He's got other opportunities where his illustration is taking him in, a new direction. So his comic book making is opening up other opportunities for him to do, illustration in a bunch of different places, which is like great news, but it's like bittersweet, right? When you're like, oh, like the original illustrator for Tights, one of the comics that we got picked up, and he's doing an IDW series. So you're happy for him,
Hmm.
but that's just kind of the nature of it, right? Um, but yeah, then you will lock in with some people where you're just like, okay, we're in it for the long haul, on this book together. Um, and and you build that foundation, that relationship. It's a very personal thing when you have, an illustrator writer team that's been working on a project for, quite a bit of time. It's super personal, and it, it becomes like something where you keep up with their life, and what's going on with their family and their highs and their lows and things like that. So one of the things I try to remind people a lot of times is that, um, same way as we talk about classroom outcomes, in the United States, that 90% of what kids do inside the classroom is dictated by what's happening in the home. It's the same thing in any endeavor, whether it's your work or you're making comics, right? So you get to know these people, because whether or not they're fighting with their partner, or whether or not like, their rent just got jacked up, or, um, they're having a medical issue or something like that, that's going to have more impact on the success of your comic book, than, anybody's particular talent. Talent comes and goes, but people's character is what's going to, truly, propel a project together, and their ability to, rally around each other and, do that as one cohesive unit.
Yeah, there's so much to even unpack on all of that as well. Like, and it really seems like through these analogies, like a lot of musicians can learn a lot from, comic book artists, and comic book artists can learn a lot from musicians. A big part of it is that, you have all these books out. You have lesser known comics that's coming, that's just always just on the uphill, it seems, the last year or so. Consistently growing, consistently having new titles, just consistently discovering new artists and creators. So this uphill, success that you're pretty much having, how would you define success first off? What does success mean to you as operating in this giant unit that's its own entity at this point?
Yeah. So I would say that, we weren't measuring the right stuff until about a year into like doing this, because you think, okay, I'm getting into the comic book business, so I need to measure, how many books are created, how many books we're selling, how many books are, how many return customers. You go through all this stuff, and that stuff makes sense, like from a business perspective.
Hmm.
But somewhere around, the summer of 2022, when we were feeling like this huge burnout, that we said, okay, well, we should probably be measuring the human experience here, because if we're really going to be at treating artists like humans, which is our motto, then that needs to be, the scoreboard that we keep. So we talk about, the surveys within our group where we talk about, okay, fairness, kindness, respect, does everyone feel like meaning and purpose behind what we're doing? Do they feel like what they're doing at Lesser Known Comics is like advancing their, personal interests as well as the interests of the group? We talk about measuring the growth of the community. We started with just like three, freelance artists and myself. We have over 65, creators that are making comics with Lesser Known Comics right now. So seeing that growth of that community, seeing the growth of like leadership development within there, where people are saying, hey, I'm really good at crowdfunding. Maybe I could teach everybody else all the things I know. Or, hey, I'm really good at conventions. Maybe I can teach, everybody else, a thing or two about that. So putting together like a Lesser Known Comics, advisory, program. Those are the things now that we're measuring, and selling comics is like a byproduct of that. Making more comics is a byproduct of that. So, we treat everybody like humans. We grow the community. We empower people to, take leadership positions. Everything else kind of takes care of itself. I been in multiple meetings recently where I thought, I thought I was in the comic book business, but and I thought my customer was, the comic book reader, but really, like as a publisher, like my customer is the comic book creator, and that's the person whose satisfaction I need to care about the most, because if they're happy, they're going to make cool books, and if they make cool books, then they're going to sell. That's that part I don't need to worry about.
And so basically, Lesser Known Comics has turned into this whole thing where you're just trying to help inspire other creators to keep going. And you've created this, as you call it, a hippie commune of a sorts, to basically just give a support system and help give us, a shared space where all of us can, we all have our struggles, we all have our moments, but we can go to this shared space and find inspiration. And we can look at these other creators and seeing what they're doing. And if we feel stuck or uninspired, we can ask a question and just be fired off with the responses of, various creators giving advice, various creators giving experiences. That's basically what you've done at this point. It seems like that's basically what it sounds like this resource has become. And it's no longer just a publishing imprint. It's kind of like a home of a sense for artists where they could find creative freedom as well. It seems like what makes Lesser Known, what did you really try to do when you're trying to make Lesser Known comics so different from regular publishing houses?
So we started with, the idea of treating artists like humans and art before
And where did
profit.
that come from? Like, where did that
Well,
saying come from?
well, what I was hearing from artists is, um, what condition, if they had reached success in their, uh, in their career to work, doing art, they were looking at the business practices of some of these like bigger corporate, spaces that hire illustrators, and they're hearing all these horror stories about conditions of, stressful hours, not being treated respectfully, in many cases, not getting paid the money that was owed them, like a lot of that stuff. We said, okay, well, that's not what we want to create, and then in many cases, illustrators are put in positions where they're not incentivized to take risks and just make something that's new and unique. That instead they're put in places where, hey, just make something safe because we could sell something safe. So we talked about art before profit as being one of the things where, as a publisher, I should believe in you as a creator that you're going to make cool things. And some of those things are going to flop. But I should essentially be like the insurer of that, that like, you're going to make cool you're going to make more cool things than things that flop. And you know what? Sometimes things that flop end up, being really cool, like cult classics that, we can all think of movies that like totally bombed at the box office, that like years and years later, everyone was like, oh, wow, this thing was brilliant, you know? Um, and, so if we respected the artist's journey and the artist's integrity there, then, that thing would pay dividends, um, a lot of folks will say, okay, well, that's really soft and squishy, and but that doesn't really make sense in business. But we've actually seen, actual economic indicators to say, okay, well, if artists are happy, they work faster because they're excited about the shit. If artists are excited, they work faster because they're stoked about the art that they're creating. You work longer hours because it doesn't feel like work. You take longer phone calls to work through problems because you're excited about the person who's on the other line.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been in those jobs where it's just like the phone rings and it's that person from work that you're like, man, I can't talk to this person anymore. Every time I talk to them, all it is problems and doom and gloom and all this naysaying and all that stuff. But anybody who's been in that creative excitement mode, making something cool with people, you're just like, oh man, we were supposed to be like in a 1 hour meeting and we've been in a 4 hour meeting just laughing and having a ball and getting all this stuff done that we didn't think,
Mm-hmm.
we even intended to. So, at this point, probably have like lost creative control of like lesser known comics, because it's a lot of letting go and letting people do, what, what their creative, excitement brings them to. I joke that like, I probably see 10% of what lesser known comics is doing. There's so much stuff, right? And
Yeah.
we joked the other day, I saw this letterer credited on one of our comics, and I asked the creator of the comic, I said, who's this letterer? I've never met this person. And he was like, I don't know. I thought you knew. And I was like, and it turns out that one of our letterers had like, brought somebody in and said, hey, this person's got talent. I'm swamped with a bunch of stuff, but I'm going to bring this person in and they're great, and I was like, that's so awesome. Like our little family's growing and I'm not even managing that. That's an awesome experience to have. Um, you know,
So, and even looking at everything that you've kind of covered so far and comparing it to music, it sounds like when we watch those music documentaries and you see a band go into studio and they're just like, the producer did this and the label wanted this and they took control over this and it was no longer our art. And then when you look at, I guess, a lot of, publishing houses where things are changed, things are altered, people literally put their art out and put their effort, but then it's not even theirs because it's not really what they created, and not even in the collaborative sense where it's exciting. It's not what I created because we collaborated and it transformed into this beast. What you're doing is getting that real sense of art and freedom and that real sense of collaboration that's not with these big, record labels or publishing houses and whatnot. And you are giving creators that freedom. Um, and I feel like that's a very remarkable thing because I feel like the more people advance and try to climb up the ladder of these, just different spots in the creative atmosphere and different levels of like labels and publishers and what's indie, what's mainstream and stuff like that, you're going to be losing more and more of the sense of like self at that point, and you're just trying to maintain that across the board, and you're trying to really just keep creators like fueled and created at just to keep going. How does that work for you as a creator? I mean, you're doing all this stuff and you do have books out and everything, but how do you balance both, whatever you do during your day job, whatever you do like with your family and like outside life, and then, running all of this and having all these phone calls, but still trying to make comics? Where's the struggle in that life balance there? And how are you trying to overcome it? Or are you having struggles? Are you, having difficulty overcoming those type of things?
oh yeah. I think a lot of people will probably relate to this. So, you know, when I was feeling that burnout summer of 2022, like if I'm feeling it, like I have a wife and kids, like they're feeling it, you know? And my wife is not a shy person, and she told me, you are not being the person that you need to be. This is burning you out, and you have responsibilities here. And it's much of a weird backwards paradox. It's the same thing with if you want to be happy in life, you need to stop trying to be happy. And they'll magically, almost magically, the universe will set you straight. If you want to be good at comics, you have to make sure that your life is in order. Because the people who rely on you, whether it's your partner or your kids or your friends or your family, um, you will have much less guilt sacrificing time, to do comic books if you know that they are getting everything they need, and you're living up to the responsibilities you have, in that portion of your life. You can't sacrifice, from your core self, to be something else. That's just not how life works. It's the same thing with um, you would never not pull over the car because we don't have any time to go get gas. But that's the way it works here with comic books. The things that feed your ability to make comic books is everything to how you take care of yourself, emotionally and physically and spiritually, mentally, all those things. And that takes time away from doing comic books, to refill that gas tank. So a lot of people say, I don't have time, to do that. I don't have time to take care of my family and health and and my mental well-being and make comic books. You don't have time not to. You need to.
Hmm.
You don't have time not to get gas in order to complete this journey. So it's a difficult balance. But the best recommendation and everything, one of the principles we operate by at Lesser Known Comics is that community is the biggest indicator of success in any endeavor that we do. So the number of people that know what you're doing, can rally around what you're doing, and can voice their support for that, is what's going to keep you going, and you share those kind of things. And what seems most personal to you is going to be, extremely universal, right? We say, oh man, I feel like an imposter. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm really tired and I don't want to work on this project. I was excited about it, but then I got 4 pages into it and I, kind of burnt out or whatever. And everyone's gonna be like, yeah, me too. And this is what's worked for me. This is, what
Hmm.
hasn't worked for me. And you guys will share things and you'll bond over that. And next thing that well of excitement, you'll have some pretty deep waters to draw on. And it's more of an art than a science, but I've just seen the trend lines indicate, you know, um, uh, that those dividends get paid. That people end up producing way more than they ever thought possible. Once they start realizing, oh man, me being good at comics is really taking about treating myself with dignity and respect, and taking care of myself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all those things, right? Physically, getting some exercise, all the things that we don't want to do. um, and and then finding that community that's, oh man, how does helping other people make comics help me make my comic get done? It seems like, you know, but man, it pays dividends every single time.
That's awesome. And as we wrap up here, what is the most rewarding part? I mean, you've covered so much, and there's so many things you've named that could really take this notch. But what's the most rewarding part about what you're doing and making comics?
That's a hard one. I think the thing that is really, really exciting for me um, is seeing people experience something that they never thought was possible. You know, So we had a first time creator the other day launch their first Kickstarter, you know, and we talked a lot about their expectations. And once again, like, we try not to be like, okay, like, this is how much profit, this is how much whatever, that is our goal for this campaign. We talked about, hey, do you feel proud about the work that you did? Are you doing well? Like, you're not burning out, all those kind of things. Like, and we did all the right things. We put the focus where it needed to be, and then watching like them see their comic book be more wildly successful, even economically than they thought possible. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people are buying my book,
Hmm.
and that's really cool to watch that. Like, like they just, it's like anytime you get good news, right? And you're like, man, am I dreaming? Like, I can't believe this is actually happening. And that's really rewarding. And, in the space that we're doing, when we built that community and that foundation, um, go into the DMs of our group chats and just seeing like everybody congratulating that person and celebrating, genuinely being happy about it together. Cause, it's like, their success is all of our success, type of thing.
It's amazing. That's really astonishing too. And I'm lucky enough to be a part of that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I encourage everyone to reach out to like groups like Lesser Known Comics, Apollo City Comics, to join a community, to ask questions, to, guest on shows, to reach out, get advice, because I feel like the indie community is so supportive and helpful and wanting to share that information, especially so freely, and encouragingly, to like really just get out there and just make your art, share it. And I mean, have fun with it. And it's going to take time because it seems like your entire journey from musician to combo creator, it all blends together. You got the grind that came from being a musician, going at it, knowing how to, I got to go on tour. I got to play every night for free. I got to do this and this and keep on writing songs. I got to keep on, practicing. I got to try a new technique. And you went to go make comics and you used all those skill sets and those business, managerial skill sets as a musician, as you're like, I got to book a tour. I got to be my own manager. I got to do this. I got to find the right people. And you took all of that and you kind of applied it to comics. And I feel like now the combo community is like getting used to like, okay, I do need to grind a bit more. I do need to go on tour and play a few shows for free to see what I can do, and just kind of like transcribing that. And I feel like that's really, brought together a lot of your success. I think that's really brought together that sense of community that you've built. And I think that's why Lesser Known Comics, has a long longevity behind it, because what it's like to be an artist of various types. So I mean, as a leader, as my own personal mentor, and for everyone in Lesser Known Comics, I feel we all adore what you do. And we can't thank you enough, and can't thank you enough for being our first guest on the show, because you are one of the most inspiring individuals I've ever had in my life. And I'm sure for many of us that are part of that LKC group, they could say the exact same thing for you. So Mark, thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait to have you on next. Tell us what's coming out next from you, and what can we expect from LKC in the next, I don't know, 6 months, year? What's new with you?
Well, first, yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, man, for the kind words, and yeah, really excited about this show. Just by the fact that you know who you partner with, both from everything to um, uh, how you do your social media to how you get your books printed. It's all very important to make sure that you're partnering with people who um, are actually invested in the success of the community. So really excited and honored to be the first guest here. Um, yeah, we have something. Yeah, like I said, like 30 books coming out in the new year. What I'm really excited about is um, we have new partnerships with imprints young and old. So you mentioned what you got going with Apollo City Comics, but we also have Rat Brain Zine, which makes all our zine stuff. We have Moonlayer Studios just doing our manga. We have folks overseas like Super Serious Comics, operating out of Australia. Position Press, Punch Publishing. We have so many studios that are coming and joining this, this movement, right? To, truly empower creators and give them, even ownership of their content way beyond what is popularly recognized as creator owned, publishing. So, I just encourage everybody, to follow us, at Lesser Known Comics on Instagram, or at Lesser K Comics on Twitter, or come to lesserknowncomics.com. Don't be a stranger, like reach out, like, ask all the questions. We help people, even if they're not publishing with us. Anything you guys need as part of the indie comic community, there is a whole army of folks who are in the same, fight as you. And we just want to make sure, that we're all doing this together.
Awesome, dude. Thank you so much. Amazing words. And I cannot wait to have you back on the show again. I know you'll be back here soon. And for everyone else, stay tuned for our upcoming episodes. We have so much more planned for you guys. And thanks for hanging, Mark.
Print your comics with Comics will spread.